They handed me a pink slip disguised as a promotion and told me I had 2 weeks to train the woman who would be sitting in my chair doing my job for half my salary while I cleaned out my desk and pretended to be grateful for the opportunity. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 30 years old, and 3 months ago I discovered that loyalty means absolutely nothing when quarterly profits are more important than the people who built the company from the ground up. So when they forced me to train my replacement, I smiled, said of course, and spent the next 14 days systematically destroying every system I had created while teaching her just enough to look competent until the moment I walked out the door and left them with a ticking time bomb that would explode the second they needed someone who actually knew how to do the work. The beautiful part wasn't just watching my replacement crash and burn in spectacular fashion, it was watching my smug director realize that firing the person who designed the entire operational framework while expecting her to happily hand over the keys to someone who couldn't even spell the software programs correctly was possibly the dumbest strategic decision in corporate history. Before I tell you exactly how I turned knowledge transfer into corporate sabotage, could you please hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear will show you that sometimes the most devastating revenge comes not from refusing to help, but from helping so thoroughly that your enemies get exactly what they deserve when they finally realize they have no idea what they actually lost. Trust me. You're going to love watching incompetent management learn the hard way that some bridges shouldn't be burned, especially when the person holding the matches built the entire infrastructure they're standing on. Let me take you back to where this really started, because revenge stories always begin months before the actual revenge, and this one started 8 months ago when TechNova Solutions hired a new VP of Operations named Derek Paulson, who walked into our company like a corporate messiah sent to save us from our outdated, inefficient ways of actually making money. Derek was one of those executives who spoke entirely in buzzwords, believed that disruption was always better than stability, and had the kind of MBA arrogance that made him assume any process he didn't immediately understand was automatically broken and needed his brilliant intervention to reach optimal efficiency levels. He wore expensive suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent, carried a leather portfolio that never seemed to contain anything useful, and had the kind of confident smile that appeared whenever he was about to explain why your job could be done better by someone younger, cheaper, and more aligned with modern operational philosophies. Derek specialized in what he called strategic restructuring, which was basically firing experienced employees and replacing them with cheaper alternatives while convincing upper management that cost-cutting was the same thing as innovation and that eliminating senior salaries would somehow improve service quality through better systematic approaches to workflow optimization. Derek had been brought in specifically to modernize our customer success department, which had been operating with the same core team for 6 years and consistently exceeded performance targets while maintaining client satisfaction scores that made our competitors weep with envy. But Derek saw our stability as stagnation, our experience as resistance to change, and our success as evidence that we weren't being aggressive enough in pursuing growth opportunities through systematic optimization of human resources and operational efficiency improvements. The customer success department at TechNova wasn't just a support function. It was the engine that drove our entire business model because our software platform was complex enough to require ongoing technical guidance, and our clients paid premium prices, specifically because they knew they could rely on expert assistance when their systems encountered problems that basic technical support couldn't resolve. We handled everything from initial implementation consulting to ongoing optimization advice, and our team had developed specialized expertise in dozens of different industry verticals, each with unique regulatory requirements. technical constraints and business objectives that require deep understanding of both our platform capabilities and our clients' operational environments. I had been with TechNova for 5 years, starting as a junior implementation specialist fresh out of college, and working my way up to senior customer success manager while building relationships with clients who generated nearly 40% of our annual recurring revenue and consistently expanded their platform usage because they trusted our guidance about technical decisions that could make or break their business operations. These weren't just business relationships. They were partnerships built through late-night troubleshooting sessions, weekend emergency calls, and the kind of personal attention that made clients choose us over competitors who offered flashier features but couldn't match our service reliability or technical expertise when critical systems failed at the worst possible moments. My role involved everything from onboarding new enterprise clients with complex integration requirements to managing ongoing relationships with established accounts who needed strategic guidance about platform optimization and expansion opportunities, and serving as the primary technical consultant for our highest value clients who required someone who understood both their business challenges and our platform capabilities well enough to solve problems that didn't have obvious solutions in our standard documentation. I also worked closely with our product development team to communicate client feedback and feature requests, participated in technical specifications for custom integrations, and often served as the bridge between our engineering team and clients who needed modifications that weren't part of our standard service offerings, but were justified by their contract value and strategic importance to our long-term growth objectives. Derek saw this comprehensive approach as inefficient role confusion that needed to be clarified through better job descriptions and more focused responsibilities that would eliminate overlap between departments and create clearer accountability for specific outcomes rather than the collaborative approach that had made our customer success team effective but difficult to measure according to traditional productivity metrics. During our first department meeting, Derek explained his vision for streamlining customer success into specialized functions with clear boundaries between implementation support, account management, and technical consultation. Which sounded logical until you realized that our clients didn't organize their problems according to our internal departmental structure, and often needed someone who could handle all 3 areas simultaneously during crisis situations when system failures threatened their business operations. His restructuring plan involved hiring multiple junior specialists to replace each senior generalist, which would theoretically provide better coverage and more focused expertise while significantly reducing payroll costs. Since 3 junior employees making $30,000 each cost less than 1 senior employee making $90,000. Even though the math completely ignored the productivity differences between experienced professionals and recent graduates who needed months of training before they could handle complex client situations independently, Derek spent the next 6 months systematically documenting every aspect of our workflows, creating detailed process maps, and developing what he called knowledge capture initiatives that would enable smooth transitions when we moved to the new specialized structure that would provide better service at lower cost through improved operational efficiency and reduced dependence on individual contributors who couldn't be easily replaced during staffing transitions. He shadowed my client calls, requested copies of all my documentation, asked endless questions about my decision-making processes, and created elaborate flowcharts that attempted to capture the nuanced judgment calls that experienced customer success managers made dozens of times each day when dealing with technical issues that didn't fit neatly into predefined categories or standard troubleshooting procedures. The problem with Derek's systematic approach was that it assumed customer success work could be reduced to a series of decision trees and procedural checklists, when the reality was that effective client management required years of accumulated knowledge about software quirks, client personalities, industry regulations, technical dependencies, and the subtle relationship dynamics that determined whether a frustrated customer became a former customer or a renewed contract with expanded services and enthusiastic referrals to potential new clients. Derek's documentation captured the mechanical aspects of our work, like how to access client records, update ticket statuses, and escalate technical issues, but completely missed the intuitive elements that made experienced customer success managers valuable, like knowing when a client's casual mention of budget constraints meant they were considering switching platforms, or recognizing that a technical question was really a request for strategic guidance about business process optimization that could lead to significant platform expansion if handled correctly. While Derek was busy mapping processes and creating systematic approaches to customer success management, I was busy keeping our biggest clients happy, which became increasingly difficult as he implemented new reporting requirements that added hours of administrative work to every client interaction and required detailed documentation of activities that had previously been handled through informal communication and collaborative problem solving. Every client call now needed to be logged with specific categories and outcome codes. Every technical issue required multiple levels of documentation, and every strategic recommendation had to be justified through formal analysis, rather than the relationship-based consultative approach that clients valued and were specifically paying premium prices to receive from our customer success team. Derek's process improvements were designed to make our work more systematic and measurable, but they actually made it slower and less responsive to client needs, while creating bureaucratic barriers between our team and the clients who depended on our expertise for critical business operations that couldn't wait for approval workflows and documentation requirements to be completed before solutions could be implemented. Whenever I mentioned that these systematic improvements were making my job harder rather than easier and potentially compromising our ability to provide the responsive service that differentiated us from competitors, Derek would nod thoughtfully and explain that short-term friction was necessary for long-term optimization, and that resistance to change was natural but counterproductive to organizational growth and operational excellence. He had a response for every concern, usually involving phrases like process maturation and systematic scalability that sounded impressive, but ignored the practical reality that our clients were paying for expert consultation, not systematic process adherence, and would quickly switch to competitors if our service quality declined in the name of operational efficiency. The breaking point came during our quarterly performance review when Derek announced that we would be transitioning to the new specialized structure over the next month, with current employees either moving to specialized roles at significantly reduced compensation levels or transitioning out of the company with severance packages that he described as generous opportunities to find positions better suited to their experience levels and career objectives. The specialized roles he offered paid between 40% and 60% of our current salaries, but required the same level of client responsibility without the authority to make strategic decisions or provide the kind of comprehensive consulting that made our customer success team effective and profitable for both the company and our clients who relied on our expertise. When Derek offered me a choice between taking a specialized implementation role at 60% of my current salary with responsibility for onboarding new clients, but no authority to provide ongoing strategic guidance, or accepting a severance package that amounted to 6 weeks' pay plus continued health insurance for 3 months, I knew exactly what was happening. He was forcing me out while making it look like my choice, rather than his decision to eliminate my position for budget optimization purposes. Derek explained that the new structure would provide better career development opportunities for junior employees while allowing senior employees to transition to roles that better matched their experience levels either within the company at appropriate compensation levels or with other organizations that might value their relationship-based approach to customer success management more than TechNova's new systematic operational model. I asked for time to consider my options, which Derek graciously granted while explaining that he would need my decision by Friday so they could begin the transition process and ensure continuity of client relationships during the organizational restructuring that would position TechNova for sustainable growth through improved operational efficiency and reduced dependence on individual contributors who couldn't be easily replaced or systematically managed. That weekend, I made a decision that would change everything instead of fighting the inevitable through legal challenges or trying to negotiate better terms that Derek clearly had no intention of offering. I was going to make sure he got exactly what he wanted: a cost-effective customer success operation staffed by specialists who followed documented processes without relying on expensive senior employees who thought their experience and client relationships made them irreplaceable in a modern, systematic operational environment. Monday morning, I walked into Derek's office with a professional smile and told him I had decided to accept the severance package, but wanted to ensure a smooth transition by training my replacement, according to his systematic approach to knowledge transfer and organizational continuity that would protect client relationships during the structural changes he was implementing for long-term operational optimization. Derek was absolutely delighted by my professional attitude and mature approach to organizational change and immediately introduced me to Jessica Torres, a recent business school graduate with impressive academic credentials, strong communication skills, excellent references from internships at major consulting firms, and absolutely no real-world experience with the technical complexity that made our client relationships profitable rather than problematic for our operational efficiency and cost management objectives. Jessica was 24 years old, enthusiastic about applying her business education to real-world challenges, dedicated to learning systematic approaches to customer success management, and completely unprepared for the reality that customer success in a technical services company required years of accumulated knowledge about software, architecture, client personalities, industry regulations, system dependencies, and the subtle relationship dynamics that determined whether frustrated customers became former customers or renewed contracts with expanded services. Derek explained that Jessica would be working closely with me for 2 weeks to learn our systems, understand our client base, master our systematic processes, and eventually take over my accounts so the company could move forward with the specialized structure that would provide better service at lower cost through improved operational efficiency and reduced dependence on relationship-based approaches that couldn't be easily scaled or systematically managed across multiple junior specialists. He emphasized that this knowledge transfer needed to be systematic and comprehensively documented following the processes he had established to ensure nothing important was lost during the transition period, and that Jessica would be fully prepared to maintain the high level of service that our clients expected while implementing the new operational approach that would position TechNova for sustainable growth. I assured Derek that I would provide Jessica with the most comprehensive training possible, strictly following all documented procedures and systematic approaches that he had worked so hard to implement for our operational improvement and organizational development, while ensuring that she understood our client relationships and technical requirements well enough to maintain continuity during the transition to our new specialized operational model. The first thing I taught Jessica was our client management platform, which was a sophisticated system that had been customized over several years to handle the complex data requirements and workflow automation that made our customer success operations efficient and effective, but only if you understood how to access the advanced features and configure the settings for different types of client relationships and service levels. Instead of showing her the advanced search functions, custom report builders, automated workflow triggers, and integration tools that made the platform actually functional for managing complex enterprise accounts. I walked her through the basic interface documented in Derek's procedure manual, which covered maybe 20% of the platform's capabilities, and assumed that all client interactions would be simple standardized requests that could be handled through drop-down menus, template responses, and basic data entry without requiring deep understanding of technical systems or business requirements. When Jessica asked about the various buttons, menu options, and configuration settings that weren't mentioned in the documentation, I explained that Derek had emphasized the importance of following established procedures, rather than developing informal workarounds that might create inconsistencies in our systematic approach to customer success management, and could compromise the standardized operational model that would enable effective scaling across multiple junior specialists. The client management platform was actually a powerful tool that could generate detailed analytics, track complex project timelines, automate routine communications, coordinate with multiple internal departments, and provide real-time insights into client usage patterns and potential expansion opportunities. But only if you understood how to configure the advanced settings, customize the workflows for different client types and industry verticals, and integrate the data with other systems that supported our comprehensive approach to customer success management. The basic interface that Derek's team had documented was essentially useless for anything beyond answering simple questions, updating contact information, and creating basic tickets for technical support, which explained why Derek thought customer success was just glorified customer service rather than the complex technical consulting and strategic relationship management that our enterprise clients actually required and were specifically paying premium prices to receive. I spent 3 days walking Jessica through the documented procedures for account management, showing her how to access basic client information, update ticket statuses, send template emails, and escalate technical issues to our support team, while carefully avoiding any mention of the advanced features reporting capabilities, automation tools, and integration functions that actually made the work efficient and effective for managing complex client relationships. When Jessica struggled to find information that should have been easily accessible or seemed confused by the limited functionality available through the basic interface, I sympathetically suggested that maybe the system wasn't as user-friendly as it could be, but emphasized that Derek's documentation represented the approved systematic approach that would ensure consistency across all customer success specialists and eliminate the inefficiencies created by individual customization and informal workflow development. Next, I introduced Jessica to our technical documentation library, which contained thousands of articles, troubleshooting guides, implementation procedures, and specialized knowledge that I had helped develop over 5 years of handling complex client issues across dozens of different industry verticals and technical environments. but the search functionality was terrible, and finding relevant information required knowing exactly what to look for and understanding how the various systems connected to each other in ways that weren't obvious from the official documentation structure. Instead of showing Jessica the advanced search operator's custom tagging systems, cross-reference databases, and informal knowledge networks that experienced team members use to actually find useful information quickly, I walked her through the basic search interface and main category browsing functionality documented in Derek's systematic approach to knowledge management, which assumed that all technical issues could be resolved through keyword searches and standard troubleshooting scripts, rather than the deep understanding of system architecture and client-specific configurations that actually enabled effective problem-solving. Our documentation library was comprehensive but poorly organized because it had grown organically over several years as our team encountered new technical challenges and developed solutions that worked for specific client situations but weren't necessarily applicable to other environments without significant modification and contextual understanding that couldn't be captured in formal documentation without creating overwhelming complexity that would make the information useless for quick problem resolution during crisis situations. I showed Jessica how to use the basic search functionality, browse through the main categories, and access the standard troubleshooting guides while carefully avoiding any mention of the informal knowledge-sharing systems, custom search tools, and collaborative problem-solving approaches that experienced team members use to actually resolve complex technical issues efficiently and effectively during time-sensitive client emergencies. When Jessica spent 2 hours looking for a solution to a client's integration problem that I could have located and implemented in 15 minutes, I explained that technical troubleshooting often required patience and persistence, but that following systematic procedures would eventually lead to the correct answer, even if it took longer than informal approaches that relied on individual experience and institutional knowledge, rather than documented processes that could be systematically applied by multiple specialists. By the end of Jessica's first week, she had learned to navigate our systems at the most basic level, but had no understanding of how to actually solve complex problems, manage sophisticated client relationships, or provide the kind of strategic consulting that kept our highest value clients satisfied, engaged, and willing to expand their platform usage through additional services and premium support offerings. Derek checked in regularly to monitor her progress, and I provided detailed reports showing that Jessica was following all documented procedures, making steady progress in understanding our systematic approach to customer success management, and demonstrating proficiency with the basic tools and processes that would enable her to handle routine client interactions according to the specialized operational model that would improve efficiency and reduce costs. During Jessica's second week, I introduced her to our actual clients, starting with what Derek considered routine account maintenance calls, but were actually complex technical consultations that required deep understanding of each client's business requirements, system configurations, organizational dynamics, and strategic objectives that influence their technology decisions and platform utilization patterns. I scheduled Jessica to shadow my calls with 3 major accounts, explaining that she would be taking over these relationships after my departure and needed to understand how our systematic approach worked in practice with real client interactions that involved technical problem-solving, strategic consultation, and relationship management that couldn't be reduced to simple procedures or standard scripts. The first call was with Morrison Financial Group, a client that generated nearly $300,000 in annual revenue, but required specialized attention because their legacy systems created unique integration challenges that our standard solutions couldn't handle without significant customization. and their regulatory environment demanded compliance features that weren't part of our basic platform offering, but had been developed specifically for their industry vertical through collaborative engineering projects. Morrison's technical director, David Park, had worked with me for 3 years to develop workarounds for their unusual data requirements, implement custom reporting solutions that satisfied their regulatory obligations, and optimize their platform configuration for maximum performance within their complex technical infrastructure that included multiple legacy systems and strict security protocols that influenced every aspect of their platform implementation and ongoing management. Instead of explaining the complex background of Morrison's technical environment, the customized solutions we had developed over years of collaboration, the regulatory requirements that influenced their platform usage, or the strategic relationship dynamics that made them one of our most valuable and loyal clients. I simply told Jessica that David Park was one of our technical contacts, and that she should listen carefully to understand how we handled routine technical support calls according to our documented customer success procedures. When David called with what he described as a critical integration failure that was preventing their quarterly financial reporting and threatening their regulatory compliance deadlines, I handed the phone to Jessica and encouraged her to follow our systematic troubleshooting approach while I observed her application of the training we had covered during the previous week and evaluated her readiness to handle complex client relationships independently. Jessica handled the call exactly as she had been trained, asking David to describe his issue in detail, using the standard diagnostic questions from our procedure manual, checking our technical documentation for relevant troubleshooting procedures, and eventually escalating the problem to our technical support team when she couldn't find a solution in the approved knowledge base, or identify the specific configuration changes that would resolve his integration failure. David Park, who was expecting immediate assistance from someone who understood his system architecture, could provide expert guidance during a time-sensitive crisis, and had the authority to implement emergency solutions without waiting for approval workflows. Instead, found himself explaining complex technical details to someone who was clearly reading from a script, had no practical understanding of how our systems worked in his specific regulatory environment, and couldn't provide the strategic consultation that justified his company's decision to pay premium prices for our customer success services. After 20 minutes of increasingly frustrating conversation, during which Jessica repeatedly referred to documentation that didn't address his specific technical requirements and suggested standard troubleshooting procedures that he had already attempted, David asked to speak with me directly. And when I explained that Jessica was being trained to handle his account going forward, he requested an immediate meeting with management to discuss what he called an unacceptable decline in service quality that threatened their ability to rely on our platform for mission-critical business operations. Derek received David Park's complaint that same afternoon, along with similar concerns from 2 other major clients who had experienced what they described as shockingly inadequate support from our new customer success specialist, who seemed to have no understanding of their technical requirements. The customized solutions that had been developed to address their specific business challenges, or the strategic relationship approach that had made TechNova their preferred platform provider despite higher costs than competitive alternatives. When Derek asked me to explain what had happened during these client interactions, I provided detailed documentation of Jessica's training progress, showing that she had followed all approved procedures, demonstrated proficiency with our systematic approach to customer success management, and applied exactly the troubleshooting methodology that had been documented for consistent application across all customer success specialists in our new operational structure. I suggested that perhaps our clients had become too dependent on personalized service that wasn't scalable or sustainable in our new specialized structure, and that some adjustment period was normal when transitioning from relationship-based approaches to systematic, process-driven customer success management that would provide more consistent service quality across all client interactions, regardless of which specialist handled their requests. Derek stared at the training documentation, clearly trying to understand why clients were complaining when Jessica was following the procedures that were supposed to improve service quality and consistency, but unable to identify specific failures in either her training or her application of the systematic approach that he had spent months developing and implementing for operational optimization and cost reduction. When Derek asked if I thought we needed to provide Jessica with additional training or modify our systematic procedures to address the specific concerns raised by these major clients, I reminded him that Jessica was performing exactly according to the documented approach, and that deviation from systematic procedures would undermine the structural improvements he had worked so hard to implement for better operational efficiency and reduce dependence on individual contributors who couldn't be easily replaced or systematically managed. I explained that our previous approach had created client expectations about personalized service that weren't compatible with the specialized operational model that would enable sustainable growth through improved cost management, and that some client education might be necessary to help them understand the benefits of our new systematic approach to customer success management that would provide more reliable and consistent service delivery. By Friday afternoon of Jessica's second week, 3 major clients had submitted formal complaints about declining service quality. 2 had requested emergency meetings to discuss their concerns about our ability to maintain the level of technical support that had justified their decision to choose our platform over competitors, and 1 had explicitly mentioned that they were evaluating alternative solutions that could provide the expert consultation they required for their complex technical environments. Derek called an emergency meeting to address what he called temporary transition challenges that would be resolved once our new systematic approach was fully implemented and clients adjusted their expectations to align with our improved operational structure that would provide better long-term service reliability through consistent application of documented procedures rather than dependence on individual relationships that couldn't be systematically scaled or managed. I attended the meeting with complete documentation of Jessica's training activities, showing that she had mastered all required procedures, demonstrated proficiency with our systematic customer success framework, and was performing client interactions exactly according to the operational model that Derek had established for optimal efficiency, consistency, and cost management in our new specialized organizational structure. When Derek asked for my recommendations about addressing client concerns and ensuring smooth transition to our new operational approach, I suggested that perhaps our previous relationship-based method had created unrealistic expectations about personalized service that weren't sustainable in a cost-effective operational model, and that some client education might be necessary to help them understand the benefits of our systematic approach to customer success management that would provide more reliable service through consistent application of documented procedures. Derek announced that he would personally handle the client meetings to address their concerns, demonstrate our continued commitment to high-quality service, and explain the benefits of our new systematic approach while ensuring that any procedural adjustments were properly documented and systematically implemented to maintain consistency across all customer success specialists in our improved operational structure. That afternoon, I cleaned out my desk, submitted my final reports, and walked out of TechNova Solutions with 6 weeks severance pay, continued health insurance for 3 months, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that Derek was about to discover exactly what he had eliminated when he decided that experienced customer success management was an inefficient luxury that could be systematized away for budget optimization and operational efficiency improvements. The transition meeting with Jessica took exactly 15 minutes, during which I handed over my client files, provided her with login credentials for the basic systems she had been trained to use, and wished her success in her new role, managing relationships that represented millions of dollars in annual revenue for clients who expected expert consultation rather than systematic procedure application. I didn't mention the advanced platform features she hadn't been trained to use, the informal knowledge networks she didn't know existed, the client relationship dynamics she hadn't been taught to recognize, or the strategic consultation approaches that actually made our customer success team valuable because Derek had specifically requested systematic knowledge transfer that followed documented procedures rather than relationship-based approaches that couldn't be easily scaled or replicated. Within 2 weeks of my departure, Jessica had managed to lose the Morrison Financial Group contract by incorrectly processing a critical system update that corrupted 3 months of their financial data, required emergency restoration from backups that delayed their quarterly reporting by 6 days, and triggered regulatory compliance issues that cost them nearly $50,000 in penalties and legal fees related to missed filing deadlines. Morrison's CEO personally called Derek to explain that they were terminating their contract, immediately pursuing legal action for damages caused by what they described as grossly incompetent technical support that had endangered their business operations and regulatory standing, and switching to a competitor who could guarantee professional service delivery from experienced consultants rather than junior specialists reading from procedure manuals. The following week, Jessica accidentally granted administrative access to a junior employee at Patterson Industries who was exploring the system to understand its capabilities, and promptly deleted essential configuration settings that had been customized over 18 months of collaborative optimization work, resulting in a complete service outage that lasted 18 hours and prompted Patterson to terminate their contract and switch to a competitor who could guarantee basic system reliability and professional technical support. Within 3 weeks of my departure, Jessica had also mishandled a strategic consultation call with Brennan Manufacturing by recommending a platform modification that would have cost them $30,000 to implement, but would actually have reduced their operational efficiency because she didn't understand their workflow requirements and had applied a standard solution template that wasn't appropriate for their specific business processes and regulatory environment. Brennan's operations director was so frustrated by what he described as amateur consultation that contradicted 2 years of collaborative optimization work that he immediately scheduled a meeting with Derek to discuss terminating their contract and finding a service provider who actually understood their technical requirements and business objectives. By the end of my first month of unemployment, TechNova Solutions had lost 6 major clients representing nearly $2 million in annual recurring revenue, and Derek was working 80-hour weeks trying to personally manage relationships he had spent months dismissing as inefficient legacy dependencies that needed to be systematized and optimized away for cost management and operational scalability improvements. Derek discovered that customer success relationships couldn't be maintained through systematic procedures when those procedures had been designed by someone who fundamentally misunderstood what made the relationships valuable and sustainable, and that replacing experienced consultants with junior specialists following documentation was like replacing master chefs with line cooks following recipes without understanding why certain techniques produced better results. The irony was absolutely perfect. Derek had gotten exactly what he wanted: a cost-effective customer success operation staffed by specialists who followed documented procedures without relying on expensive senior employees who thought their experience and client relationships made them irreplaceable, and it was systematically destroying everything I had built, while proving that some professional work simply cannot be reduced to processes and checklists without losing the expertise, judgment, and relationship dynamics that make it actually valuable and profitable for both the company and the clients. Jessica was doing her best to follow the systematic procedures exactly as she had been trained. But systematic procedures only work when they're designed by people who actually understand the work being systematized, rather than by efficiency experts who mistake documentation for competence and assume that complex professional relationships can be reduced to flowcharts and standard operating procedures without losing the accumulated knowledge and strategic insight that make those relationships profitable, sustainable, and defensible against competitive threats. The client complaints escalated from service quality concerns to contract termination threats as Jessica continued applying her systematic training to situations that required expertise she hadn't been taught to develop, and relationship management skills that couldn't be learned from procedure manuals written by someone who had never actually managed complex technical relationships or provided strategic consultation to enterprise clients with sophisticated business requirements. 6 months later, I heard through professional networks and former colleagues who had maintained contact that Derek had been quietly reassigned to a strategic planning role with no operational responsibilities after the board of directors reviewed the client retention crisis and determined that his systematic improvements had cost the company more than $4 million in lost revenue, plus additional legal expenses related to service failures, contract violations, and professional negligence claims from clients who had suffered business damage due to inadequate technical support. Jessica had left TechNova Solutions entirely after what colleagues described as a complete emotional breakdown when she realized that her training had been deliberately incomplete and that she had been set up to fail by someone who had prioritized personal revenge over professional ethics and organizational success, which Derek had conveniently failed to mention when he hired her to replace an experienced senior employee at a fraction of the compensation cost. The remaining customer success team had been restructured again, this time with emergency hiring of experienced senior consultants at premium compensation levels to attempt recovery of client relationships that had been damaged by Derek's systematic approach to operational efficiency, and the company had quietly abandoned the specialized operational model in favor of the relationship-based consultation approach that had made their customer success team effective and profitable before Derek's optimization initiatives. Meanwhile, I had joined Pinnacle Solutions, a competitor that specifically recruited experienced customer success professionals who understood that technical relationships required expertise that couldn't be systematized or replaced with cheaper alternatives, and that recognized the value of senior consultants who could provide strategic guidance rather than procedural support to enterprise clients with complex technical requirements and sophisticated business objectives. Within 4 months, I had signed contracts with Morrison Financial Group Patterson Industries, Brennan Manufacturing, and 4 other former TechNova clients who appreciated working with someone who actually understood their business requirements, technical challenges, and strategic objectives, rather than someone following systematic procedures designed by executives who had never actually done the work they were trying to optimize. Peterson Industries specifically requested that I handle their compliance consulting going forward, and their technical director mentioned that working with my new firm reminded him why he had originally chosen TechNova Solutions before they became obsessed with systematic processes that prioritized internal efficiency over client satisfaction and strategic value delivery. The financial success was satisfying, and the professional vindication was even better because it proved that my approach to customer success wasn't inefficient relationship dependence that needed optimization through systematic procedures, but was actually sophisticated professional work that required years of accumulated knowledge and the ability to solve complex problems that didn't fit into standard procedural frameworks or junior specialist job descriptions. The most satisfying part wasn't the money or the client acquisition or even Derek's professional humiliation and organizational exile. The most satisfying part was knowing that I had given him exactly what he asked for, a systematic, process-driven approach to customer success that eliminated expensive senior employees and their inefficient relationship-based methods, and watching him discover that those relationships and that experience were the only things preventing his optimization efforts from optimizing away the actual value that made our work worth paying premium prices for in a competitive marketplace. When Derek forced me to train my replacement according to systematic knowledge transfer procedures, I taught Jessica exactly what he wanted her to know: how to follow documented procedures without understanding the underlying complexity that made those procedures inadequate for real-world client relationships. And when that systematic approach failed catastrophically because it ignored everything that actually mattered about customer success, he had no one to blame but himself for assuming that professional expertise could be replaced with better documentation and cheaper labor costs. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply giving people exactly what they think they want, especially when what they want reveals how fundamentally they misunderstand what they're trying to improve, and watching them realize that their cost-saving innovations have eliminated the very capabilities that justified their clients' decision to pay premium prices for services that competitors couldn't match through systematization, budget optimization, or procedural standardization that ignored the human expertise that made complex professional relationships valuable, sustainable, and profitable.